We're live.
Okay, again, thank you all for joining us. And this is part 2 of day 1 of our City of Rochester budget review meeting. Chairman Evans will join us shortly. He has technical difficulties right now. We will start by taking attendance.
Councilmember Evans, Councilmember Harris,
Present.
Councilmember Patterson,
Here.
Vice President Lightfoot,
Here.
President Scott.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll start this afternoon session with the Rochester Fire Department. Welcome, Chief.
Good afternoon.
Glad to have you. If you want to introduce your team and make a brief opening statement.
Yes, thank you. I just want to say, I want to acknowledge the members of the Rochester Fire Department for their hard work and dedication during the COVID pandemic. So with that, I'm going to name my team that's here with us today. I have with us Executive Deputy Chief Andrew Lonther, Kathy McManus, Principal Staff Assistant, Sarah Ruckberg, Budget Analyst, Deputy Chief Teresa Everett, Training Academy, Lieutenant Darren Batty, EMS, Lieutenant Jamie Renner, Special Operations, Deputy Chief Christine Shriver, Fire Marshal, Lieutenant Daniel Kern, Planning and Research, Superintendent of Fire Equipment Maintenance, Robert Hoffman, and I have on tentatively Dr. Jeremy Cushman, our Medical Director. He already had another arrangement, but he offered to jump in if he had a schedule change. And that is my team.
All right. Oh, thank you. So we'll go section by section. Are there any questions on, I don't have the script, so I'm just sort of doing this. 10.1 to 10.5. Are there none?
Yes, Madam President, thank you. First of all, I want to acknowledge the chief and want to commend you and congratulate you again. I believe, as it was stated before earlier in our budget hearings, that you are probably the only Latinx chief in the state of New York. I think that's correct. So I want to commend you for that great feat.
Thank you.
And I know you well, and I have an affinity for the fire department, of course. But I first want to start off by, I'm looking at the recruit on page 10.3, adding funds for the firefighter recruit class. So I kind of wanted to get your, and I want to pause for a minute to lift up the work in this space of Deputy Chief Teresa Everett and the work that she's doing with the recruit class under her leadership. I think we've seen more diversity and, of course, as the administration, more diversity through the Rochester Fire Department, successful diversity through the recruit class, especially in the trainee program. We've seen leaps and bounds. I think it was last year. Unfortunately, it got kind of quailed with the pandemic and things of that nature. We had one of the largest minority recruit class ever in the history of the Rochester Fire Department. So I think oftentimes we don't acknowledge all of this work and the hard work that it goes to achieve some of these milestones and things that we are been fighting for, especially when we're on racial equity. When we speak of these jobs, as you know, Chief, and others, are like hitting the lottery. You know what I mean? You get these jobs and they change people's lives. They change. You talk about a direct pathway out of poverty. Our Pathways to Public Safety program is one of those pathways out of poverty and for our citizens in our community. And it's a direct connection between the Rochester City School District and our citizens and residents of this particular community. So I kind of wanted to speak to the recruit class and or ideas for, expansion of that program, or what does that program look like? We're always hearing rumors that, the training program is gonna dissolve or and things of that nature. Every year, I've been hearing that for 20 years, and the program is still longstanding. But just kind of wanted to hear some of your thoughts and vision around the recruit class and recruiting and diversity when it comes to specifically to the Pathways to Public Safety program?
Okay, thank you for that question. To answer the first part, we are scheduled to do a recruit class at the beginning of 2022. We are scheduled for a class of 17 off the list. And the numbers that you see under major change highlights is basically the salary for those 6 months that we have them. Now, regards to your question specifically to the CPPS program, unfortunately, due to COVID, last year's program was put on hold. So there was not a high school class held last year. However, we are in current communications with DRJ, Director Tansy Demps and the City School District to reopen up that program again and hopefully start it again in September. So it should be back on track. Obviously, it's a great opportunity to increase that diversity. We've had many success out of that program, and it will definitely receive 100% of my support as we move that program forward. So that's basically where we're at. Like I said, we're in talks with them right now. Hopefully, we could get up to a good start and get that program back on track in September.
Thank you. One more question, and I
Yes,
will
please.
hog the mic. Council President and Chairman Evans, I see he's back with us. I'll give my other colleagues opportunity to ask questions. I'll come back towards the end, but I just want to, when I didn't see it in here, and if I'm moving ahead too fast, I'll defer to my other colleagues. But when the station alerting and the issues around the Trump radio systems, is there anything, within this budget that's addressing? Of course, I see the station alerting. There was a lot of conversation and talk about transitioning over into the trunk radio systems, different challenges around that. And have those been addressed? Are you guys happy with the station alerting system? Is it working? Or where are we in that whole transitioning of that whole communication piece?
Okay, well, in regards to the station alerting, we just finished installations. However, we are finishing final testing. So that project should be done by the end of this fiscal period. Obviously, with any new type of technology, you're going to have your difficulties, including the installment of the CAD system back in March. However, we continue to work with ECD and the county to kind of deal with any type of issues that may have occurred during these times. In regards to the trunk system itself, we are on track in regards budget-wise. We continue to make the necessary purchases to move forward. For example, during this fiscal period, we purchased for the line division all of the portable and mobile radios. We currently have purchase orders to continue purchasing the radios and equipment for staff personnel. Where we are with the system is basically we're in communications with the county. Our stance continues in regards to the trunk system that we do not feel comfortable operating in an IDLH environment, which basically means immediate dangerous to life or health. And that's kind of been the long-standing issue that we've been dealing with over the past couple of years. Basically, what we're looking for, for basic calls, the trunk system works great. But when we get into those type of atmospheres, we're looking for a different solution. The solution that we're looking for is the capabilities, what we call to work off network. So basically what that means is if I'm talking to you on the radio at a fire scene, when I talk, it goes to the network and back to you. And then when you talk, it goes to the network back to me. The concern during an IDLH atmosphere is two things. First, if especially in an urban setting with high rises and buildings, that communication could be blocked. And also if you have a technical difficulty with the network, if it's shut down, we lose communication. We can't talk person to person. And that's an issue or concern that we have, which is a current capability that we have in regards to the radio system. So with that though, we're having great conversation with the county. They are working with us to meet a system that will meet our needs. That system is commonly referred to, and you may hear it as a conventional overlay. And basically what that's gonna do is it's gonna put a system on top of the current truck system that's gonna assist us with those capabilities that we're looking for when we're operating in an IDLH environment. So that's basically where we're at right now.
Well, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I want to lift up and just thank all of the firefighters, command staff, et cetera, for the work, the diligent work. I know many of them did not work from home, of course, worked throughout the pandemic. And we've been lifting up other departments and employees. Of course, we look at all of our employees, but more specifically, our emergency responders. Definitely want to thank you and all of your workers, even to include as recently as Memorial Day. Memorial Day, you had a fatal fire, which again, and I'll come back later and maybe ask you some questions around firefighter wellness. And I thank you for keeping us updated on that particular fire and what happened there and with that family. And I'll come back with some additional questions towards the end. I'll let my colleagues chime in now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Before I turn this back over to Chairman Evans, I wanted to just clean up my shaky start and acknowledge the presence of my other council colleagues, Gruber, Lupian, Melendez, and Pio. Thank you for being here with us as well. And I have one question on that section, and the section will go to 10.9 as opposed to 10.5. But on 10.3, there is a $700,000 increase in overtime projected. Chief, can you tell me what is causing that?
Yes, the purpose for that is just basically to cover the fact that we're going to be projected to have more sworn vacancies. So that's basically what that money is for. On our staffing level that we're projecting to see in the next budget fiscal season.
So the vacancy level will be greater than it traditionally is?
Oh,
or is it...
yeah. So last fiscal period, we were at an overhire. So you're going to see a higher number this time because last time we had more people, where for now we're projecting more vacancies coming up at this time.
Chairman Evans, it's your show.
Yes, thank you, Madam President, for filling in. And thank you, Chief Hernandez. Sorry for my technical glitch. I could hear everyone, but my screen was frozen. So,
no problem, sir.
So we are back at it, 10.1 to 10.9. Yep. Council Member Harris, I know you had a question, and I'm sorry if I missed, if I jumped the line or anything, but Council Member Harris, you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Councilmember Evans. I'd like to echo the remarks of Vice President Lightfoot and President Scott. Great job. Looking forward to the recruitment class that you mentioned, the 17 numbers. I have a question in regards to the funding that's allocated for the turnout gear repair and small equipment repair. Can you explain what the definition of small equipment is for the fire department?
Yeah, so basically like your small tools or like the chainsaws, rotary saws, those types of equipment that the firefighters use.
Okay.
And the only reason for that was moving it because it's not really a CIP item. So that item there's just to clean it up, to move it where it's appropriately belong in operations.
And the turnout gear repair, I noticed that in the CIP, we also ordered turnout gear. So could you clarify, why there's a turnout gear repair here and what the life cycle of turnout gear is?
Well, the issue with that, I believe it's about 10 years, but unfortunately during fires, they do get damaged a lot. So we use the opportunity to fix them to maximize their use.
All right, thank you. I have another follow-up question. It's in regards to the increased funding for Urban Fellows Program. Could you explain to me why there's an increased funding? And I'm pretty sure it might have been related to the pandemic, but I just wanted clarity.
Yep. No, so last budget, this current fiscal period, it was canceled. We did not have one. So that figure right there is just basically the restoration of the program, bringing it back online. And I could you kind of remind me a little bit more of details as to what the program entails, what it's about? My answer about the program is basically the opportunity to hire young individuals to come work in a part-time basis in various departments in the city. So we usually tend to hire about 2 each time. A lot of times they work with our budget office, and the other individual we tend to use usually has to do with computers, data analysis capabilities. Oh, okay. So this is like administrative work, not really. That we use them for. I don't know. Obviously, I can't speak for the other departments, but that's basically what we've used them in the past for. All right. Thank you. And the other question is, I think this is related to that section, is the executive director, the executive deputy chief change from put a different position. What do you plan to do to fulfill the need of planning and research after that change? So that individual is going to be replacing a battalion chief confidential position. I'm basically looking for the opportunity to have better oversight and efficiency in both our administration and operations. When you look at other fire departments our size, it's a common structure to have two at the second level, separating operations and administration. Me personally doing that position for 2 years and covering both, it is a lot to cover. And basically I'm looking more to streamline and make it more efficient so each individual could focus on their specific area as we move forward.
Okay.
Yep.
So just to clarify, I mean, the planning and research will still continue, but what under which department?
Correct. That's not changing. The structure of the planning and research is going to continue as it goes. Right now we have a lieutenant of planning and research. That individual who was reporting to the battalion chief is now going to be reporting to the admin executive deputy chief.
Thank you very much, Chief Hernandez.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Gruber, 10-1 to 10-9.
Actually, mine are on the next section, so I'll hold off.
Okay, great. Anyone else on 10-1 to 10-9? Okay, we'll move to 10-10 to 10-15, and Councilmember Gruber, we'll start with you.
Thank you, and thank you, Chief, for all that you and your team do. Question on, I just want to look at the KPIs for a second on 10-12.
Sure.
So total incidents, it seems like there was a kind of significant uptick, about 3,000 additional incidents last year. Do you think that's related to COVID, people spending more time in their homes? Is there a different hypothesis there?
Which number are you specifically looking at, sir?
The 38,847 in total incidents versus in previous years, it was like 34,000. And even this year we're budgeting 35,000. You see it right above vacant.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So, yeah, that's for the estimated for this fiscal period. We usually do our numbers by calendar year, but for the fiscal period, we did have a drop in EMS calls due to COVID. There was we changed specific responses to like those sick calls that we would normally go to, but due to COVID, fire departments were removed from those calls. So we did reduce in those areas. However, we've been having an increase in other types of calls, including fire-related calls. Actually, to give you some data, within the last 5 months, from January 1st to May 16th, we've had a 48% increase in fire calls in general, and a 60% in incidents overall. So yes, wow. The last couple of months, we have been having some increases in the call volume.
Wow. So you're gearing up for that to be kind of sustained and continued for these continued increases in calls?
Correct. I mean, historically, the summertime tends to be busy for us. And obviously with what we've been seeing lately and how things are getting busy during, warm weather days, we are preparing for that.
Got it. So I just want to go back to what President Scott was asking you about, because I don't think I totally understand the idea of overhiring versus last year versus having significant vacancies. Is that because? Sorry to load the question. Is that because there's a lot of retirements coming, or help me understand what all the vacancies are about?
Well, I'll let Sarah Rockford kind of describe the entire process that she usually runs, covers that for us. Sarah?
Well, for fiscal year 21, we skipped having the full recruit class. We only had the 7 that we sent to Monterey Falls, New York. But in fiscal year 21, we started the year with 13 overhires, and that's because we did have a class in fiscal year 20. For fiscal year 22, we are projecting 5 vacancies. So we take out for the vacancy allowance, we take out in salaries, but we're adding it back to overtime to fully staff the fire department.
I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to think of a different way to ask that question, but I'll follow up with it. I do want to ask about something related though, which is I see one of the goals for the department is about working with HR to streamline the hiring process, and I'm just wondering what kind of changes are you referring to, and are you pretty confident that we're going to get full classes moving forward?
If I may answer your other question, just to see if that helps.
Please,
we're
please.
starting a recruit class in January, but they're not going to come out until June. So that hiring is going to help cover overtime. So that's why we need to increase the overtime base, because we got to cover those months while we wait for those recruits to graduate.
Got it. So really this increase in overtime is a direct is directly to fill the gaps
Correct.
that ultimately the recruit class is going to fill long term.
Yes.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you. That's really helpful.
Yep.
And so can you talk for a second, Chief, or maybe it's another member of your team about the KPI or the goal related to changing or streamlining the hiring processes?
Yep. Okay, so
what's
basically,
being planned there?
So what we've been doing is we've been working in communications with DRH, HM and RPD, basically going over the entire process. So what we've been doing is we've been having regular scheduled meetings. We've been identifying and clarifying roles and responsibilities of who's responsible for that, for what sections. We've been implementing engagement and support activities to kind of assist candidates in the hiring process. For example, some of the workshops that we've done covered hiring process workshops and background investigation assistance workshops. You know, the reason we do those is because we tend to have issues with the way they fill out the paperwork or go through the process, and we tend to lose viable candidate that if we would have given them assistance ahead of time, we would not have lost. Other things we've been doing is, you know, we moved the fingerprinting process towards the beginning to kind of be more efficient and cost effective. And another thing we've done as well is, you know, we've made changes to the background packet to kind of help reflect the characteristics and attributes needed for a firefighter candidate. So basically, we're looking over to kind of make the process more efficient, more, you know, less impacts in regards to the way we process people in the hiring process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question I had about vacant structure fires. Chief, what drives those type of fires? I mean, we see those in cities across the country.
Right.
You know, these vacant structures that somehow end up. Is it homeless folks being inside of it? Is it arson? What's the driver there?
It's multiple. Like you mentioned, sometimes it's homeless people. You know, especially in the wintertime, trying to stay warm. Unfortunately, it's due to drug activities as well. That you know, we tend to get vacant fires. So, I mean, obviously there is no electrical or other type of instance. So usually a vacant fire has some type of intentional or unintentional action that caused it. So, you know, so those are the common reasons that we tend to have vacant fires.
And can those types of things, I mean, obviously, you know, because our department does a great job in terms of education about fire safety, obviously. But with the vacant structures, are there strategies that you can use that we can deploy to prevent those types of things, or is that just something that we just kind of expect?
Well, I mean, we kind of expect it, but one of the things we try and we work with, you know, with DES is if we properly board them up and make it difficult to get in, then that kind of reduces those types of fires. And like I said, I think overall, compared to the past, you know, we've gotten better with that. You know, even if there's a fire or a minor entry, you know, we'll definitely call them up immediately to come up and board it up. So if we could continue securing the structures, it kind of minimizes or eliminates, you know, the potential of people going inside the structures.
Right. Thanks. Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Councilmember Evans. I have a question on the 1012 section, and I'm just curious about what constitutes a service call and a good intent call.
A service call is like kind of like a water problem type of situation. So, you know, it's not a fire related, but we're helping them out. So a water problem is a good example of a service call. A good intent call is a situation where, you know, they thought they had a fire, but it wasn't, you know, so they had a good intention of calling us and it really wasn't what they thought it was. So we classify those as a good intent type of situation. So for example, if you see smoke in the area, you know, that's a good intent call because you thought it was a fire.
Thank you, Chief. Are residents ever charged for any of these type of calls?
No.
Service? Okay.
No, I mean, especially a good intent call, once again, they have good intentions. So, I would rather encourage people, if they think they see something, to call just to make sure that there's not a problem. So yeah, we would definitely never penalize anyone for doing a good intent call.
Okay, thank you. And I think I heard you mention it, and I might have missed it because I was writing. When is the next civil service exam?
We haven't scheduled that yet at this time. The original intent with this current list was to have a 2-year list. So since we skipped last year, we're probably going to get 2 years off of this list. Like I said, once we get a date, I could shoot that out to the group in regards to what we're projected in regards to the class.
Is there any talks of extending the list time frame?
Not yet, because we're still early. I mean, basically, civil service rule is a list must be established for at least 1 year up to 4. So obviously, when it gets to that second, third year, we could always extend it if for some reason we think it's a good idea at that point. So,
okay. And I saw on page, let's see, one more. This was my final question for this section. You have conduct on page 1011, conduct officer training, officer development training. Is there any intentions in the future? And I know that the Race and Reel has done fabulous work. And just curious to know, is the fire department intending to kind of take on some of that training for their officers at least first?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that last part? What's your?
I know the Race and Reel initiative that the city has worked on intensively. Is there any chance that you guys will consider implementing that training in your officer development training?
Yes, I mean, we're always looking, obviously the basic foundation is firefighter tactics, but we know that being a supervisor is more than just that. So definitely as we move forward with setting up curriculum, we always look for the opportunity to kind of go outside that type of level training and do more management type of training. So yes, that would definitely be a possibility for us to look into.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Lightfoot, and then, I'm sorry, Councilmember Melendez on this section, then we'll move to the next section where Council Vice President Lightfoot has a question. Councilmember Melendez on this section, 1010 to 1015.
Yes, just a quick question related to customer perspective. I'm assuming this is under EMS, but I just want to get clarified. The opioid overdoses or other types of overdoses, would that all be emergency medical responses? And is there a way for us to understand how many calls the fire department actually responds to for those incidences?
Yes, it's covered under that. And if you want that information, I could send that to the group.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on sections 1010 through 1015 from any council member before I move to 1016 to 1020? Okay, Vice President Lightfoot, 1016 through 1020, you asked a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the administration, to the chief. I want to speak specifically to, it's brought up about fire prevention, or what's, NFPA 1300 now is referring to as community risk reduction, right? So it's another terminology for something we've been doing for many, many years. However, I would have to say my 3 years on council, I think I brought this issue up with past chiefs and and past budget hearings. My concern of the lack of community risk reduction and or fire prevention, or AKA fire prevention, that I haven't seen. And last year, we were basically told it was a result of the COVID-19 is the reason why. But I feel that, do we have a community risk reduction plan for RFD?
So to answer your questions, I mean, yes, unfortunately last year, due to the COVID pandemic, a lot of things were shut down, both, firehouse visits and people actually requesting events. Our main focus for the first couple of months were to stabilize the manpower. There were a lot of fire departments throughout the United States that were closing down firehouses due to exposures. So, I do agree 100% that, in the future, obviously, we need to be more proactive in regards to continuing our, CR types of operations. To answer your question, when I first became fire chief, and, we have spoken about this in the past, one of the first things I did was talk to the fire marshal in regards to community risk reduction. I believe strongly in it. Obviously prevention is the key. to any type of fire program. So we are working together. We have a new lieutenant that was implemented. We're looking to implement a new firefighter in the position. And our goals is to kind of make it more, not just for that unit, but more a fire department type of operations. So, one of the keys that we're working on is, for example, is having that lieutenant promote and prepare the line companies to be better prepared to develop and give out different types of CR programs and activities, and to be able to deliver those on a regular basis. Another example is historically, we just normally, and it's a good thing, after a fire, we'll check the smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. But, talking with the fire marshal and the lieutenant, we're looking to be a little bit more proactive now, where instead of just doing those things and waiting for someone to ask a question, we plan to be more proactive in regards to discussing EDIF, discussing the dangers of smoke and, recreational fire safety types of situations. So I acknowledge your concern. I definitely want to continue working with the fire marshal and our fire safety division to make sure that we're being more aggressive as we move forward with our fire safety initiatives in the city of Rochester.
I appreciate that, Chief, and the information, but it sounds like that's a no. We do not have a community risk assessment plan with implementation processes and evaluation processes. We don't have such a plan. Is that correct? Like something in paper.
I'll follow up with the Chief Shriver. Is there anything in place that we've had in the past that we're working off of?
With all the transitions, we've been working on formalizing and getting our ideas moving forward in place. And again, like Chief Hernandez mentioned, having our line division do risk reduction activities when they're in a home, when they can connect with a person after a smoke alarm install and engage families. We again have to go back to where everything from an opportunity standpoint was shut down for the last year for us. We're trying to regroup and reassess and look at delivery in new ways, like Zoom, which is still part of how we need to move forward.
So Mr. Councilman, so yes, we'll definitely work in that to make sure that we have the type of plan and program that you're looking for.
Yeah, I'd like to see a more.
Definitely.
I'd like to see a more detailed plan specific to Rochester that's dealing with, implementation process, evaluation, reporting, all of that's for this year, for this budget cycle. I would really like to see that in place, and to include the fact that, I appreciate and respect the fire marshal and yourself, sir, as far as speaking to, the pandemic. But I just will offer for consideration that I think that as was spoken by the fire marshal, that there are other ways that, there's radio, there's social media, there's there are other ways, there's television, there are other ways that, you can get out and communicate risk reduction to this community. And I think that we have to work around how things are presenting themselves to us, using our technology to be able to think outside of the box in non-traditional ways that we can provide community risk reduction, especially education to our communities, especially younger communities. And we have a great resource in our rec centers and our art centers, which have been operating the entire time of the pandemic. And there are people, there are families, there are youth, there are individuals who visit these facilities and who are in these facilities that could benefit from the education around community risk reduction and fire prevention, safety in your home, et cetera. So I just remember that being a lot, and I just haven't seen it in quite some time since I've been on council. It hasn't seemed to be a priority. But I think this last fire we just recently had can be a testament to the fact of the need of education around fire prevention. So I just, not to belabor the issue, but I look forward and we'll be following and looking very closely for such a plan in the future. Now I'll speak to this last piece here, the implementation of the electronic patient care reports to align with new federal and state requirements. Can you speak a little bit to that, please? That seems to be new to this budget.
Yeah, so basically we use the CME program, which is basically kind of like an online program to recertify our members. So recent requirements in the system require that we do electronic PCRs to maintain the ability to continue in that program. If we don't follow those guidelines, we lose the ability to do the CME program, and we're going to have to go back to a traditional EMT program, which is definitely not cost effective, and it's going to definitely take away a lot of our training time.
Or is it still the requirement in the policy that all firefighters have to be and maintain emergency medical technician certification?
Yes, what we're talking about here is just basically the process that we use to recertify our members every 3 years, like we've been doing, is what we call the CME recertification program. So that's where and like I mentioned, it's basically, we do online classes, there is no written test like in the past when you do a traditional EMT. So it gives us the ability to maximize our time, especially when we have, 460 EMTs that need training on an annual basis. So this requirement is just basically adding, they're looking for more proficiency in EMS, so they're kind of using it as a way for us to do electronic PCRs to kind of, oversee our program. And if we don't do it, we won't be able to do CMEs anymore. And as I mentioned earlier, then we would have to go back to the traditional way, which isn't going to be cost effective for us.
Not only is it not cost effective, Chief, as one who was constantly trying to get my CMEs in order, it would not be a good morale piece either, I think, for a lot of the members on the job. My EMT just expired recently because I can't do, because I haven't been a member in 3 years. Right. So if anybody fall out in city council, you're gonna have to see Lachey. Can't help it.
Virtually. You have to heal us virtually, Mr. Vice President. Anything else, Mr. Vice President?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have anything else on 1016 through 1020 who I may have missed on the fire department? Okay, with that, then we will thank Chief Hernandez and his team for being here before us, and we will take a brief respite for about 15 minutes and reconvene with dries at 2:45. So we'll stay on this line and we'll reconvene at 2:45.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Hello, everybody.
Good afternoon.
We'll get started in 1 minute.
Jeez, 1 minute. We can't just. All I said was hello, everybody.
Hello,
Hello.
Councilmember Patterson.
Okay. Jim, did you share with the commissioner that it looks like we got a solution to that problem?
No, but you just did.
Okay.
On that note, while we're talking about solutions to problems, which we know Jim Farr always could solve, along with Michael Patterson, we'll reconvene. We'll reconvene this budget hearing to move to the Department of Recreation and Human Services. I want to welcome Commissioner Lyman Torres and her team. And Commissioner Lyman Torres, I will turn it over to you to make any statements that you may want to make and introduce your team.
Okay, thank you so much, Chairman Evans, Council President Scott, Vice President Lightfoot, members of council. Good afternoon. I want to, again, thank you for the opportunity to introduce the team as well as to just say a few words in addressing you. The team that we have here today, I'd like to introduce Sarah Fletcher, who is our Deputy Commissioner. If you could just give a wave, Sarah. Thank you. Jim Farr, who is the Director of Public Market. We have Eric Rose, who is the Director of Community Athletics. Sarah Scott, who's our Director of Recreation and Park Stewardship. Kendra Hale LeBoy, who's the Director of our Center Operations. Chris Fitzgerald, who's the Director of Animal Services. Christina Heilugenthaler, who's doing double duty. She works on our budget, but also in OED. We have Mai Ho, who is our Manager of Administration. We have Aaliyah Henton-Williams, who is our Manager of Crisis Services. Melvin Cross, our Manager of Pathways to Peace. Jamila Crossdale, who is our Youth Workforce Development Coordinator. And Kiara Warren from the Commissioner's Office. I've introduced the team, but I would like to take an opportunity to just say that we did accomplish a number of goals on behalf of the community this past year, despite the pandemic. And I did send out a brief highlights document a few weeks ago to you, members of the council. So I won't repeat that, but I would be remiss if I did not take the opportunity to acknowledge the tremendous efforts of the DRISE team in serving the community throughout this past year in the pandemic. Meals for Children, we have been a part of distributing nearly 3 million meals to children and families since the beginning of the pandemic. We've supported over 100 food box distributions with FoodLink. And the R centers did turn into sites that not only distributed food, but PPE, play kits, became places of learning, and other tremendous services being delivered by the R centers during this time. The public market stayed open the entire time, making sure that there were access to critical foods, especially during the shortages. Animal Services provided free pet supplies and food to keep animals in homes as people lost their income and their ability to do that. And lastly, we've hosted vaccine clinics every Saturday and Sunday at our centers, making sure that this is something that's accessible and equitably distributed throughout our community. We did have several team members sick with COVID throughout this time, one who was critically ill, and we are so grateful for their recovery and their return. We know that team members had sick family, lost loved ones, and battled with and went through remote learning with their own children. And we are so grateful for their tireless service during this time and ongoing. So thank you again, Chairman Evans, for allowing me to address the council and to recognize the staff. You're on mute.
I'm sorry, yes. I said we will start with sections 12.1 through 12.9, colleagues, which is the Recreation and Human Services organizational restructuring highlights. And I will start with Councilmember Patterson. Did you have a question or comment? And then I'll go to Councilmember Lupien.
Okay, so first and foremost, I would like to commend you, Commissioner, and everyone in your department. You have gone through a radical transformation in a very short period of time, done it with grace and skill, and have provided more than this community than we could probably expect, given the challenges that you've been working with. So I really just want to commend you and your team for what you've done. You know, somebody had told you a year ago that you were going to be going into mental health. I don't think you would have necessarily been, I mean, we knew we were going there, but you really didn't know you were going there. And you've gone there and you've done it, and you've done just a tremendous amount of things, and you're still doing more. And, you know, this is just really impressive what you guys have done budget-wise and work-wise. I really want to commend, you know, you got a ton of great people, but Mr. Cross, he came through for me on some serious problems in the Northeast, working collaboratively across different departments of city government. I'm really impressed with what you guys are doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lupien?
Hi, I'd like to echo my colleagues' comments. The Department of Recreation and Human Services has just done an incredible job and has really transformed the kind of services that we provide in Rochester. I kind of have a general question to start that isn't actually about this budget, but wondering, outside of this budget, have you put in any requests for funding from the federal American Rescue Fund dollars?
Councilmember Lupien, yes, we certainly have some proposed ideas. We will be doing some community input sessions, one starting tomorrow. There's a survey posted as well, just collecting input on priorities from the community before proposals are moved forward. But there are a number of initiatives on the table that would support the work that Recreation and Human Services is doing, including you know, improvements to amenities for children and families. We've talked about the nature center. We've talked about a number of improvements that could happen in parks and playgrounds. We've also looked at what workforce development opportunities there needs to be to really transform what that could look like for our community and really re-engage in adult workforce development activities. And you know, we've looked at what we can do to support our public facilities and amenities around animal services, as well as violence prevention, mental health services, and some business development support for the public market vendors and international plaza vendors as well. So these are all out on the table. Again, we will be collecting community input.
Are those proposals that you mentioned available, or are they just kind of waiting for public input?
At this point, we're collecting public input. We do have a session tomorrow evening as well, and we have the survey that's currently launched. So we'll have more to follow that input process.
Thank you. And Councilmember Evans, is this 12.1 through 12 what?
12.1 through 12.9.
Okay, so I have a question on 12.7. The one KPI, it says the number of victims of violence engaged in interventions. It looks like it increased pretty dramatically. Can you kind of talk about what accounted for that increase?
You're talking about under Pathways to Peace, to be specific? I'm gonna go ahead and answer based on that. Okay.
Yes.
So under Pathways to Peace, we really took an opportunity to put together all of the work that we've been doing on mediations and interventions. And we have had increased connectivity with people despite not being able to be in schools. A lot has happened with our programming and the increase that we've done in number of people on our outreach team. So we have been able to increase the number of folks on the ground doing the work, and that's reflected here.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. President Scott?
Thank you. A couple questions. Commissioner, no, firstly, congratulations and thank you for all of the great work that you've done over the last several months. It's been a yeoman's job and you all have done it very, very well. I definitely would not have seen us, the city, involved in providing mental health services because I always saw that as the role of the county. So not only are we in that space, but we're doing it big time. So congratulations on your hard work. Now, I don't know whether you sent it in the package before or am I just missing it in the budget? A lot of what you're doing does indeed respond to recommendations contained in RAISE, but it's not identified thusly. Did I miss that?
So, in our budget equity tool, we do make some, connections to the race commission reports, but we don't here in this particular chapter, but there are many connections to the work around equity and access in particular. So, we do have a focus on that throughout our mission and critical processes and vital customers throughout this, but that is how we've related it to the commission at this time. We are also going through recommendation by recommendation at the department level to see where we can further connect our efforts to that report.
Great, I look forward to seeing that. On 12.6, Rec on the Move, that number is bouncing around mightily. What's going on with that?
Well, we had some transitions with what we put in our budget for what we were estimating for 2020 prior to COVID and the pandemic. And we did have to make some shifts in terms of what personnel were doing, but we also did have, a decline in participation. So we're trying to get our numbers ramping back up and in alignment with what we think might be a trajectory to do.
What do you see the trajectory more toward the 8,000 in or the 6,000 in, or where do you see it sort of leveling out at?
Well, we're hoping that, we can achieve more than what we put in here, which is the 3,500. We're hoping that it falls between the 6 and the 8 for this year, that we can regain that as more people are coming back outside and allowing their children to do that. But we are hoping that we can get back to where we were shooting to be in that 8,000 mark. We'll keep marching toward that by adding additional sites. And we do continue our outreach to people, letting them know when we'll be in their neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on 12.1 to 12.9 before we move to 12.10 through 12.14? Okay. Councilmember Harris, you have something on 12.1 to 12.9?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Councilmember Chair Evans. Commissioner Torres, thank you so much for your service and all that you and your team have done with the transitions. I like to roll back to 12.6 as it relates to the Rochester Community Sports Complex. I see that the attendance for the actuals have kind of like declined in 2019 to 2020, but there's an estimation that we will increase. Can you talk to us about what's the plan post-COVID for that complex?
Absolutely. The indoor training facility at the McGuire building that we've been working on for some time is just about complete. We expect that to be done in July. So we will be able to have that online for the community late this summer. And so because of that, we do anticipate attendance at the complex increasing. And we also have seen the attendance increasing as the reopening has happened and more people can hold large events or larger events. And the more that we're able to fill the stand safely, of course, but the more we're able to open the facility up, the more we're able to increase attendance at that site. And there were some regional and, national even entities such as the Drum Corps Associates and others that have been looking at returning to the stadium. And we're planning to do so prior to COVID. We've been talking with them again about plans to return in this next upcoming year. So there has been an increase in interest. And as things reopen, we expect to have more utilization of the location.
Thank you. In the past, that complex was utilized for concert type venues. Is there a plan to expand it to that, or will it remain a strictly sports complex type venue?
We'd prefer to try to keep it sports related, athletic event kind of related, and maybe have other venues for concerts. Is certainly not off the table, but the calendar is full with people who want to use it for sports and other related activities.
Thank you. I have one other question for this. You said is it through 12/6, Councilman Evans, or was it through 12/8?
12/1 to 12/9.
Okay, so then I have one on page 12/8 as it relates to Duran Eastman Beach. I see that operations has been restored and there's an increased funding allocation there. Can you explain to us what that is? What the funding, the allocation of fundings represent?
Yes, this allocation of funding here demonstrates the restoration of that. We did not operate the beach last year, so it wasn't in our maintenance of effort and needed to be restored. So that's what's there, and that includes mostly staffing, but we do have some fees and other preparatory services that we have to do to be able to open it. At this time, the beach is slated to open on June 19th.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And again, thank you for all that you guys have done this year.
Thank you. Anything else from council members on 12/1 to 12/9 before I move on to 12/10 through 12/14? Okay, 12/10 through 12/14. This includes administration and finance, animal services, and the public market in La Marqueta. And we will start with Council Member Lupian and then Gruber.
Okay. Could you say a little bit about the job description for the emergency operations coordinator that's added?
Absolutely. So that position is a position that is able to not only coordinate response efforts for the community, but also internally and coordinate internal cross departments for the response to the community to events that right now we're focused on COVID, but prior to that, we were looking at weather-related incidents. We were looking at emergency preparedness, disaster preparedness, continuity of operations plans, and making sure that we have our both internal and external coordination and communication together. This is an opportunity to do that, and an opportunity to document our pandemic response, because prior to this, I don't believe we had a pandemic response plan, but we certainly should be documenting what we have done so that we do have a pandemic.
I think that's great and forward thinking, knowing that this probably won't be the only time that we deal with something like this. Is this an ongoing position or is it more of a short term?
Well, at this point, we have, it mapped out for fiscal year 22, but certainly with everything I've just listed, I do see it longer term.
Okay, thank you. Just two more questions. There is a significant amount of food waste at the public market, and I was just wondering if you'd been in talks with DES about potentially including the public market in the composting pilot.
Jim, would you like to answer that?
Yes, in fact, we are part of the compost education project that DES is doing, and we do have it's really the Flower City Pickers who work with us, the 501c3, that helps us salvage food, and not only for human consumption, but for farms and other uses, has diverted over 1 million pounds in just the last 2 years. So they work actually with Impact Earth, and Impact Earth takes away anything that's compostable. So yes, we are coordinating.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know that. Good news. Then last question on this section. There was a line item that was showing a decrease for this year for non-personnel funding, and just wondering what that was.
Those are just some miscellaneous, non-personnel related expenses that we were able to reduce and be more efficient with. Supplies, other things like that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gruber on 1210 to 1214, did you have questions?
Sure did. Thank you. Can't let a budget hearing go by without talking about how much I love and adore the public market. And I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Lemon Torres, about how the market did stay open for the entirety of the pandemic. That is not something that I think should be or will ever be forgotten. It's truly an essential service. I appreciate Jim's answer about the composting pilot, and see there's even a KPI on 12.6 about the tons of waste to the transfer station. I certainly hope that as much of that as we can does factor into the DES composting pilot, but it sounds like it's already underway. The only question I have about the market and La Marqueta as well is related to transportation. I know there's been a couple of issues related to RTS, the Reimagine RTS, and how it's impacted the public market. We just got a bit of a placemaking study from DES, or sorry, from you all in Dries about the public market and bike access. And I'm just wondering, are there potential big plans for trying to work on the accessibility of the market as it continues to grow and we have more and more people there and more things there? It does in some ways counterintuitively make it even harder for some folks to be able to access the space. So are there major plans for that?
We are definitely looking at that. We are in the process right now of being able to select and award a contract to complete an updated version of the public market master plan. Because that, we certainly have completed a number of things from the prior master plan, and what you just brought up around transportation, as well as what is happening around the public market with, the land and the real estate around that, and the desire to grow the footprint and different things that we would be able to do there for events and new American markets and other things that we've all talked about strategically. We need to move those forward, but we will be doing that as a part of this master plan that, again, we're at the stage to select and award a firm to complete that plan.
Great. So in the master plan, there will be opportunities to think about transportation. Do you have a sense, Commissioner Lemon Torres, will the master plan, do you think it'll be created it'll be finalized during this budget year?
Yes.
Great. So the only other question I have on this section is related to animal services. And first of all, I think it's a great thing to move animal services into this department. I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm just really curious if someone can give just an overview of what kind of efficiencies we think can be gained and what kind of integration we can create between an animal services department that has for a very long time been part of RPD. How are we going to integrate it into this department, and what should the community be excited about?
Well, I'm very excited about it and could certainly speak about it, but I would like Chris Fitzgerald to answer that, since this is a move and opportunity that I know that he and his team have thought about and talked about quite a bit. Chris?
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Council Member. Yeah, I share the Commissioner's excitement and enthusiasm. It's been years in the making. I'd say first, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the Rochester Police Department for nearly 21 years of support. So we're not leaving because we didn't have support there. I think we're leaving because it it makes more sense in terms of the alignment of our mission of serving people and animals in the community and looking at it from more of like a One Health perspective, and that keeping families together is better for the animals, better for the people, better for our community. So I think that there's that kind of synchrony with the other services, some of which we've already touched on here today in this department. You know, frankly, some of the efficiencies and improvements I think are yet to be identified as we're you know, just early in this assimilation process. But I mean, I've already been welcomed into this team, and there are several people on this in this call that are already familiar because they're going to be part of my my team moving forward. So you know, I'm thrilled by it. I think the work is going to continue more or less seamlessly in terms of the services, but you know, with more of a focus on supportive services. And I think that this department is going to be helpful in helping us do that better.
Well, thank you. And I'll close my comments here, but for this section, but would ask for us to maybe make sure we get some type of a work session scheduled at some point, not a particular date in mind, just sometime maybe before the year ends, the calendar year, so that we can hear a little bit more about the efficiencies that can be gained. I'll just tell you what I think about when I see this transition. I think about the fact that we, and Chris and I have spoken about this at length over the years, we have a lot of work to do to increase the percentage of pet owners who actually license their pets. We have a huge amount of efficiencies to be gained in terms of how we utilize our dog park. And I spent a little bit of time during the DES session talking about how I really want to see a West Side dog park too. We have a whole lot of efficiencies to be gained around how we incorporate our licensing around who owns chickens and who's creating community gardens and who's becomes a vendor at places like the Public Market and La Marqueta. And that's all stuff that can be done so much better in the Department of Recreation and Human Resources than it could ever be done in RPD. So I'm very much looking forward to it, but I hope that we build out some KPIs and some strategies to do those very things or potentially other things, and just ask that council gets updated as you go.
Absolutely, Council Member Gruber, and that'll be good timing as well, since the Animal Services is also planning to go through a rebranding initiative, and we'll be able to update council on that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, did I get everyone on 1210 to 1214? Administration and Finance, Animal Services, and Public Services, Public Market and La Marqueta? Okay, let's move to 1215 to 1218, which is questions related to the Bureau of Recreation and Youth Services, 1215 to 1218. Questions? Questions?
You got a couple in the chat box.
All right, we got, oh, no, those are for the next section.
I have one for 16.
All right, 16, go ahead, Council Member Lupien.
So I'm just curious, does the budget reflect any expansion of our center hours?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sorry, does this budget reflect any expansion in our center hours?
No, it does not. This budget reflects our current operations.
Okay, and just thinking, you know, with the other funding that's coming, you know, is there a ballpark number like 500,000, say, that would be enough to expand hours at the centers?
Well, the short answer is 500,000 will definitely expand. The longer answer is I would have to get back to you on exactly what that expansion could be with that kind of funding. But yes, if we had additional funding, we could expand the hours. I know that has been something that we are starting to hear as people are coming back into programming, and we will evaluate that. But if there's if there is funding available, we certainly would be able to come up with a targeted plan to increase hours.
Yeah, I just a little anecdote. I have a friend who kind of was around gangs when he was growing up, and I asked him, like what was the thing that stopped you from going that way? And he said the rec centers, and that as he got older, the hours were decreased, and what a shame that was. So that's something that's important to me.
Thank you. Again, if there are increased funding opportunities, we absolutely will be able to extend the hours. We know how critical our centers have become, even more so since we've been doing the work for pandemic response. And people have come back to the art centers, and we do want to make sure it's a resource.
Anyone else on 12:15 through 12:18?
Just one from me, Councilmember Evans.
Yep, go ahead, Councilmember.
Just a question about the KPIs. So on 12.6, I see that there's an expected significant increase in usage of the community sports complex, which I think is great. Significant increase in the usage of aquatics, and that's from 1920 to now. Those are pretty big jumps. But there seems to be a pretty significant decrease in our center attendance in the KPI from 1920 to this year. Is that just because hours are being kind of slowly brought back, or what's the reason for that?
Yes, part of it is that hours are slowly coming back, and we had such a dramatic change during COVID that we've been trying to gauge how we will recapture that. When we were in the COVID reopening the first time, we had started to regain as much as upwards of 50 to 60% of our prior attendance that was starting to come back. But then in November, we had to kind of shut down traditional programming again due to rising numbers in COVID, and that has impacted that inflow of trying to build that attendance back. So these numbers are reflective of our attempt to get back to some of our prior 5-year averages that preceded the pandemic.
Got it. Last thing for me here, I just want to make sure that I understand staffing. I see in this particular bureau, there's a vacant full-time coordinator of community athletics that's been eliminated. There's a part-time position eliminated. There's other positions that are eliminated due to budget constraints. And then there's even above that 2 vacant full-time training and quality coordinator positions that are eliminated. That seems like those are pretty significant hits. Am I just not seeing where those positions were upgraded? Are those just straight cuts?
So the training and quality coordinators those were vacant positions due to retirements that happened throughout the year, and we were able to. We did still have to find some efficiencies in our budget, and so those were cuts. The coordinator position is one that we had placed a person in a role as a part of a succession plan. John Pacone, our longtime manager of athletics and aquatics, did retire, and part of that succession plan was to have a coordinator and then be able to reduce that added position, the position that we added to work on succession plan. So that's what you see.
Thank you.
President Scott, I think you had a question on this section.
Yes, I'm wondering about My Brother's Keeper. What programming? How are we going to be spending that $825,000?
Yes. So the My Brother's Keeper programming, normally the funding just goes directly to the Rochester City School District, and we support them with the coordinator as well as other programs that fit under that umbrella. But this time there was some funding that had gotten left on the table due to COVID, and the school district was able to acquire that funding from the state and pass that along to the city. And part of the reason for that is to be able to employ additional youth this summer. So a large portion of that will go to running a summer academy to employ youth, additional youth, as well as provide additional career exploration for those youth throughout the summer. So that funding is largely for the summer academy, as well as some of the leadership development for youth.
Any others on 1215 to 1218? I know that there are several questions on 1219 to 1223. Okay, I'll move on to 1219 through 1223. I have a couple of questions, but I'll go to my colleagues first. Councilmember Patterson.
Thank you. All right, so as you're aware, we've had a spike in, I know it seems, why are you bringing this up here? This isn't the police. Okay, because we now understand that everything that we need to deal with in our society isn't a problem for the police. So we've had an increase in violence in our community. Mr. Cross and his team have been engaged in trying to mitigate that. We recently lost a state partner that was also doing similar work. Can you explain to us, can you help us understand what the status is of that other program? I know you're like, this isn't our budget, but it has an impact on our budget because it has an impact upon our community. Can you explain to us or share with us the status of that other program that's gone down and when we can expect it to return?
Yes, I can, because we have stayed in touch with the Department of Criminal Justice Services at the state that funded that program. You know, after council and members of administration met with them to talk about the importance of having that funding and those resources in the city of Rochester, particularly at this time. You know, we did circle back with them after we had asked them to consider how they would be investing that money here. Their response to me was to send me a copy of an RFP that is due, I believe, next week, that is basically for a hospital to respond to. They've said they would accept nonprofit responses, but the preference was a hospital system. So Strong Hospital will be applying for that funding and has been talking with us about how they can partner with the city and other partners in the community to get the street outreach work back on the streets, because that's not something that they would be able to do directly. They would need to partner in order to do that. It's a substantial amount of funding and it's a substantial amount of street outreach that we do need back out on the street. So we're hoping that we can move this application process as quickly as possible, staying at the table, staying on top of communications with DCJS, because we don't have time for this to be happening right now. But it is happening right now, and we just have to keep it moving through the process.
Okay. So along those same lines, moving to federal dollars and things that you may well be considering, it seems as though these dollars can be used for outreach work in a range of areas related to public health. A significant number of the continuing COVID cases are happening in a younger population that could potentially be accessed through your organization. Just seems like y'all already have your hands on them or you're close to them. Is there any thinking or planning along those lines? Yeah, and I'm always trying to get more money to Melvin because Melvin needs more money because I need Melvin to go talk to some more people.
Yeah, we'll definitely take more money for Melvin and Pathways and all the victims of violence. We definitely need more resources. But for what you're talking about, we are partnering with the county. There are lots of opportunities to educate around health, all kinds of health disparities and issues while we're talking with people. So we are working on some strategies around that with the county and the county health department.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Melendez, and then VP Lightfoot.
Okay, so this is my first chance to talk to you, Commissioner, I just want to say thank you as well for all your work during the pandemic and your team's work during the pandemic. I think, I've seen you in action and fighting for equity across the city, making sure we had sites when we did not have sites. I really appreciate your work in that space. With respect to human services, I just had a question about Facet and PIC and integration. So I didn't see Facet here. I'm assuming that all of it's being consumed by PIC. Is that accurate?
No, it's not. So the PIC team is separate from the assessment, that went underway regarding both the Facet program and the victims assistance programs, which transitioned. So we took a look at the services that were being provided, the recognition of those services and access to those services from the community, and they're really, over time, from the implementation of those programs many decades ago, things have definitely changed to the point where many of folks in the community didn't know that was a resource that they could access and weren't aware of the resources that were available. And I would also say that, the Victims Assistance Unit worked really hard to deliver on the grants that we had for victim services, but those grants in themselves are very limiting to what they can do in terms of resources for victims of violence and which and how they're served. And so we really needed to take a different approach to how we were serving the community. So what you'll see in crisis services is, community support counselor roles, which will serve as short-term case management roles that will continue to serve victims of violence, victims of crimes, but also families and individuals on a more long-term basis. So they won't be, and they never were, programs that, were first responders. That's the PIC team. But being able to follow up and continue to provide that ongoing support and navigation, whether it be with, court appointments or, related services that were already being provided, we want to expand that. We want to have greater access to that and have referrals coming from not just RPD, but other places. Because we do have the PIC team that can be providing referrals for ongoing support services and connectivity and follow-up. And we also have Pathways to Peace, we have 211, we have community partners, all who are looking to make referrals. And even in our own work in the art centers and other places, we have people who are in need that we can consolidate and pool our resources, pool referrals, and make sure that we're coordinating and managing it differently. So taking these programs outside of the police department really opened up the opportunity to expand the work beyond the legacy models that were there, and to really pull everything together in a different way that's going to benefit the community.
Okay, great. Another question. Just looking at the budget, I appreciate the Office of Neighborhood Safety model, and I think that's going to be a great thing for the city. I also was just looking at the Pathways to Peace part of it and wondered, are we seeing a reduction in staffing for Pathways in the shuffle, or is it all okay, remaining whole? Okay.
Right. No reductions to Pathways.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. VP Lightfoot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to Administration, Commissioner Torres. I would be remiss if I didn't also echo the comments of my colleagues of the great work that you have done under your leadership, as well as our great esteemed mayor, direction and department that and all of the your staff that have been really just bombarded with a lot of controversy, I would say, to say the least, as well as stress throughout this pandemic, and to be able to shift your direction and take on the additional responsibilities and to implement additional programs that are very new to the space of this work, I think is very commendable. So I just wanted to start off by commending you with that. With that being said, as by doing that, we know that there's consequences that come with changes. And I know myself and maybe my colleagues are also receiving correspondence from unions that, members are being laid off, they're being demoted, they're being let go. And I just wanted you to speak to, because oftentimes there's a lot of misinformation that's put out there. And I want to be clear as to, are we laying people off? Are we firing people? Are we demoting individuals? I mean, what is really going on with the shift of change due to the new direction that's happening with the FIT team, the person in crisis, the crisis intervention, as well as the facet. So if you could, not so much FIT, excuse me, facet, if you could just speak to these changes and how they're affecting and impacting existing employees, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be happy to do that. As I answered Council Member Melendez's question, about what is happening with community support, taking facet and victims assistance and creating community support counselors, it is the same pool of people. So there are 8 full-time positions that are available to all full-time members of both of those teams. 5 part-time members that were a part of facet have all been transitioned to the PIC team. That is work that they qualified to do and we're pleased to transition into doing. There were 3 part-time members of the Victims Assistance Unit remaining. One of those we are able to have a part-time position for in the unit and continue. The other 2, we do have part-time positions, not only through Drive, but in the city as well. We put those out on the table for them to consider. Those 2 individuals have not done so yet. So that's the meaning there of the transition. Now, for those 8 full-time positions, 4 of those individuals actually receive an upgrade to the new position, and 3 of the individuals, it's a lateral move, so no change. For one person, there is a slight downgrade. There is a downgrade, but that's because that person will no longer be in a supervisory position, but will still be in a very important position supporting individuals in the same position as all the other members of the team. So, whatever has been said, that's what the status is. Of course, those individuals have the opportunity to select to not take the new roles, and some may choose to do that, but they certainly have been extended those positions, and we certainly are hopeful to have their continued work for the residents of our city.
Thank you.
Just following up on Council Vice President's question. So can you just talk a little bit more about victims assistance?
Yes, absolutely. So victims assistance, again, very much like the facet program, had some strings attached in terms of how to access the program and how to access some of the funding. Now, some of the funding is tied to grants that are very specific on how those funds can be used, but that also kind of limited a little bit the services that we were providing to the community. We were only taking certain referrals and not necessarily taking referrals from outside the community, which our office has been continuously getting since the transition to DRIVES. And our community partners, the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition members and others have really been stating that we have to do something differently around support for victims of violence and crimes. And so this is an opportunity to do that. And those members of that team have been offered the positions as the community support counselors. As I mentioned, the 3 part-timers in that team, 1 is able to continue on with the team, and 2 that have the opportunity to have other part-time positions that are available throughout the city.
And so you said there were some grants that come along with the existing victim assistance program. Will those grants still be able to be used for the changes and transitions? Are we allowed to still be able to use those grants for the new purposes or the new structure that we've laid out?
Yeah, absolutely. We're not changing any of the objectives of the grants. We're not changing we're not asking the grants to change our obligations. We're going to still maintain our obligations to those grants. We're just simply changing the titles of the people doing the work and actually enhancing their, those particular folks are getting an upgrade in funding. So no, we are definitely going to stay true to the grants that we have in place and be able to continue that work.
Okay. And one other question for me that I could have asked this to HR, but I'll ask it to you because I know just from my experience in recreation has always been that place where you've had that, well, this department in general, and the council president probably can speak better to this than I can, where they've had this career ladder where it's always a place where you can move up that career ladder. Can you just talk about either in this section of the budget or just overall your feelings about those opportunities, that career ladder, which is so important for this department? We really could see the movement progression of folks that start here and then they move up. How do you see that in this current budget and just going forward in general?
Yeah, it is very important, and I definitely see a lot of movement there. We've been able to offer opportunities to people who have been in the department for a very long time, who have, waited for opportunities for advancement. We have, over the past few years, had a number of retirements that did open up opportunities for advancement, and people have been able to get those positions and rise to that. In this budget, there are opportunities there for people to continue to move up, as we were able to restore some of those opportunities last year. So we do still have multiple levels, and people have been navigating that and moving up through the department, which has been a real pleasure to see people who have the skill set, who have the experience and the dedication. There are a number of folks on the team who will, have devoted their lives to this work, to the residents and the youth, and will continue to do so. So that you will see there are opportunities that have been taken advantage of by people moving up throughout the ranks in this budget, as well as in prior ones.
Okay. Councilmember Lupien and then Gruber and then Melendez.
Hi. Last year, council gave the PIC team $600,000. And in this year's budget, that doesn't reoccur. So just kind of wondering how you made up the difference to continue and then expand services.
So there, the funding that was allocated from City Council, as that does not reoccur. However, the funding that was needed to be able to make the expansion is here, and was requested and approved and is here in this proposed budget.
Okay, I guess I don't see it. Like, I don't know why I don't see it reflected on the line item.
I'm sure we could,
yeah. I'm
sure the budget staff could highlight that and follow up for you.
Sure, yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And then one last question. I'm very excited for the creation of the Office of Neighborhood Safety. That's a very timely new initiative. And if folks don't know what that is, it started in Richmond, California in 2007. And Richmond at the time had the highest murder rate in the whole state. And in 10 years, it decreased by 80%. And it was really by taking a public health approach to violence prevention. So, in the budget, it talks about developing partnership with community providers. I'm wondering, do you feel that our community providers have the capacity at the moment to scale up to the need?
Actually, I don't. I think that there's going to need to be some capacity building that happens in order to get community partners up to scale to be able to do the work. I think that's been some of the issues that led us to the discussion that Councilmember Patterson brought forward. I think there's been some capacity issues in the community that we can address by, looking to strengthen, looking to partner, looking to, foster structures that allow, folks who are good at doing the work to be able to focus on that. What we're hopeful is that with the Office of Neighborhood Safety Plan, convening a summit, developing a plan, that part of that plan is going to have to be how to develop that capacity. And there will need to be some funds available to do that and to support that.
Do you have an idea of what that dollar amount might look like?
I don't, but I can tell you that it's not here in front of you. And so there would definitely need to be another look at what resources are going to need to be available for that. I think this plan that we're commissioning, I hope is going to inform us as to what are the right levels of funding. And I am also hopeful that the other funders in the community will step up and participate. I have asked the funders, the funders group, the foundations to be a part of this work and to align their efforts to this Office of Neighborhood Safety work as well. And they've agreed to do that. And this may be something that they could focus on, which is the capacity building for these nonprofit partners that are going to need it in order to receive funds and to carry out these services.
Thank you. And just kind of a last follow-up to that, do you think that money would be kind of a limited time period, or would that need to be something that's ongoing?
That's definitely a limited time period. I think there's an infusion of dollars that are going to be needed to build up the capacity. And that's going to be short term.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We got a couple of folks here. Councilmember Gruber, and then Melendez, and then Harris.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions on this section. So if any of them need to be put into the record and responded to in writing, that's fine with me too. But maybe I'll start with hopefully a fairly straightforward question. The RCSD contract with Pathways to Peace, $110,000 or so, $111,000 was not renewed. Any sense of why? I remember when that contract first started, after there was a big fight after an East Wilson High School game. I presume with the return of sports coming up soon, there's going to be the same kind of concern from RCSD. Any indication as to why the contract was not renewed?
It will be. It wasn't in time for this process, but they've been a little delayed on those things. But we will have the contract. We will be in the schools in the fall.
Got it. Thanks. So I want to get back to I think Councilmember Lupien was just talking about the Office of Neighborhood Safety, and I just I can't help but think when I think of how that new office could function, of the potential synergy with the neighborhood service centers, which are so much a part of our kind of quality of life conversations. I know it's a little premature, and I'm sure we're going to be doing a whole lot of talking and work sessions around this office as it gets created. But can you just give me a kind of at a 30,000-foot view? Is there going to be any synergy between the NSC and this new office?
Yeah, actually, Commissioner Kirkmeyer, Daisy Algren, and myself, we met just 2 weeks ago to talk about this very connectivity. That there are, we started listing out the ways that there can be synergy between the NSCs and not only the Office of Neighborhood Safety, but Pathways to Peace. That some things that we can do immediately between the two groups to foster communication around hotspots, to communicate about different individuals that need these referrals that they come across, and just making that connection at the neighborhood service centers for access to these prevention services. So I think there's going to be more that we can do, but right now we've started with just getting the information from the NSCs and having Pathways be engaged with their work.
Great, that's really encouraging. Thank you. My last question, and this is probably for Mayor Warren. I regret not bringing it up earlier when we were doing the mayor's office, but that's where the proposal is to study the creation of a Commissioner of Public Safety. Do I have that title right, Commissioner of Public Safety?
Yes.
So I'm just wondering, as that position, or at least that study is done, is that going to incorporate not just obviously RPD and the fire department, but will it also incorporate all these different crisis intervention services that are now in Commissioner Lemon Torres's department?
So when you think about the entire administration, we all work collectively together, even if you're in a different department. And so, the Commissioner of Public Safety will be, the chief, as well as the fire chief, as well as the 911 director will be reporting to the commissioner based on whatever the study comes back with. But our hope is that we'll continue to work collectively together to reduce violence in the community. We were able to work together really closely pre-pandemic, to reduce violence. We had, the lowest rates of violence in 30 years, reduction in gun violence and all of that. And so our hope is that through the Office of Neighborhood Safety and all of the work and being able to get back in schools and being able to really to talk to people and be face to face with people and to engage in a different way than we have been over the last 14 months, we'll be able to start to get back to those strategies that we know work and have them be long lasting. Because the Office of Neighborhood Safety and the things that we've learned through Richmond and also Newark, New Jersey, where, we think that this capacity building and working with our community organizations that we work with prior to, but building them up can also help us be able to sustain the reduction in violence across the board, even when we have situations like a pandemic happen.
Thanks. That all makes sense to me. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that study. But so those three, I know it's kind of cart before the horse, right? Because it's a study. But in theory, those three departments, fire, police, and emergency communications, would all have a direct line to this new commissioner of public safety. But the stuff related to violence prevention that is currently under Commissioner Lyman Torres, that would continue to report into Department of Recreation and Human Services with like a dotted line over to that new commissioner or something like that.
It's not necessarily a dotted line. We coordinate and work collectively together as a team. So, for example, Parks and Recreation, Parks is under DES, but also under but the Department of Recreation and Youth Services has something to do with it as well. And so it doesn't matter where the entity is currently located. You have to work collectively together as a team to bring about the change that you want to see in the community. So, one of the things that prior to back in I believe it was 84, 85, when we had a commissioner of public safety, there were a number of things that that person was in charge of. There was a number of different laws and, there are some things that may have to be negotiated and other things. And that's the reason why we want to study this correctly so that when it's time to implement it, we do it in a way that is effective and efficient for all concerned. And so that's the reason why it's, studying this, looking at what happened back in the 1980s when we had it, looking at other cities and what they're doing and how they relate to other departments. But regardless of whether we implement this in 6 months or, implement it in 3, it is a matter of really us all working collectively together, neighborhood and business development, working with the police department, working with Pathways to Peace, working with our community organizations to really focus on reducing crime, as we all know that this has been a challenge across the board, it's, many cities across the country have seen this spike. And, I think that the best thing that we can do to reduce violence is what we know works, and that is to get in people's homes and get into the classrooms and get back out in the streets and start to engage people the way that we have in the past. And I think that that's going to be our best strategy in working with our community in order to do that.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Gruber, I would just add just one distinction to the Office of Neighborhood Safety and these other initiatives that we brought forward that we're currently doing in human services is that they're civilian-led initiatives across the country. So the Office of Neighborhood Safety, for these community-based first responders, they're all civilian-led initiatives. And I think that that's Pathways to Peace. I think that distinction is critical. And, if I may be so bold to put it out there, that's my recommendation, that those civilian-led, initiatives, that's how they were designed and that's how they've been successful. And I think that's how they should remain.
Amen. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Melendez and then Harris.
Okay, two quick additional comments and then one question. So years ago, we had, in collaboration with Pathways in the NSC, we coordinated neighborhood safety nets, and we had one in each quadrant of the city. And it brought together Pathways, the resources of the service center, and community collaborators, and those wraparound services for youth. And I think it sounds like it could fit well with some of the dialogue that you're having, following up to what Councilmember Gruber was saying. In addition to that, I just want to point to Oakland, California. There's the Prevention Institute that's done some work around gun violence. So as you continue to explore, I'll send some information, but I think that is a good option to consider. And then finally, the question I have is around adequately funding PIC. So I see what's in the budget. I understand it. I know it's new. We're all growing. We're all learning. But I also wanted to understand whether or not you feel that maybe there are some constraints budget-wise. I know that our resources aren't infinite, but do you think there's room for growth there in short order, or is it kind of where we need to be right now?
Well, this budget does include a little room for growth on the PIC side in terms of being able to hopefully expand to other types of calls throughout this upcoming fiscal year. One thing I will say that we'll have to keep watch on is that the team size is growing and we're outgrowing our current clinical supervision structure. So we'll have to make some investments in clinical supervision and we'll have to watch that and the needs there. And we also have the opportunity to add peers, people with lived experience to the work. We're fortunate at this time, we have been awarded some funding from FLIPS to be able to fund 4 full-time peers to add them to the PIC team. They're going to do that for a year and then also provide support evaluating the impact of adding those peers to the team. So I think we'll have to take watch at what happens with that particular pilot that's funded by an outside source. But those peers, if they certainly the model suggests that they are very important to the work, we'll have to take a look at what that means in upcoming years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Councilmember Evans. I just have a question, Commissioner Torres, about the AmeriCorps program being transferred from the Bureau into the Bureau of Recreation and Youth Services. Could you talk a little bit about that, the allocation of $85,000 to make that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Flower City AmeriCorps, we're hopeful that we hear soon on our reapplication for that grant. We've been awarded that grant for several years, and it's really done very well for city residents and for the city. What we're doing here is just, you see that coming in and out of recreation and being part of human services where it would be best aligned since we now have this opportunity to do that. So what you see moving as our personnel, so we have a program director and a member support specialist.
Thank you. The AmeriCorps program, does that provide any opportunities for those individuals to get employment with the city after they've completed the program?
Absolutely. We have people who have moved from AmeriCorps positions into available positions that we have. We do encourage AmeriCorps members to learn not only what they like to do, but what they don't like to do in their experience, and then use that opportunity to build relationships with their host sites. We are a host site, but there are a lot of host sites in the community that do also end up employing AmeriCorps members when they're done with their service.
Thank you. That concludes my questioning. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions around this section? 1219 to 1223. No other questions? Okay, if there are not any other questions, I want to thank the commissioner and her team for joining us for this hearing. And we will take a brief break and reconvene at 4:06 for the Emergency Communications Department. So let's take a quick pause for the cause and we'll reconvene at 4:06 for emergency communications.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. 3 minutes. Is everyone back?
Hello.
Hello, everyone's back? Okay. Director Soretto, are you here?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Director Soretto was here. So we will commence with the budget hearing, our last hearing of the day on the Emergency Communications Department. Director Soretto, I'll turn it over to you to introduce your team and then make any opening statements that you might have, and then we'll go right into questioning.
Thank you, sir. I'll be brief. I just thank you for the opportunity to introduce my staff. On my right is Deputy Director Amy Mills, and on my left is Deputy Director Greg Roney. Behind him is Damatis Rivera, our training coordinator, and to my right in the back is Tammy Sardu, the Senior Administrative Analysis for our center. And if I could take just a few seconds to I'd like to take this opportunity to publicly thank the men and women of 911, 311 of the Emergency Communications Department that throughout this pandemic came to work when others in other professions around the country were able to work from home, but to function, they had to be here, and they came in under adversity and they did an outstanding job. So I just like to publicly thank them. Thank you very much, sir.
No, thank you. We want to thank you and your team for all of the work that your department has done and continues to do for in terms of serving our city. So thank you. I will entertain questions from colleagues on the entirety of the budget for emergency communications. So does anyone have any questions to start? But if not, I will start with one. I think I ask you this question every year, or whoever is sitting in your seat, I always ask this question, and it's about recruitment. How is that going? Obviously, you guys have tough jobs because you are 24/7, 7-day-a-week operation. There's no days off there. You're always on, similar to police and fire. So can you talk a little bit about recruitment and recruitment, and also very much interested in retention as well of folks?
Well, it's not been an easy year for us here at ECD with recruitment. our standard ways of recruiting, of going out, going to the churches around the city, recruiting with the Rochester Police Department, the Rochester Fire Department, going to schools, going to different job fairs, has not been allowed during the pandemic. So we had to resort to some other kind of thinking a little bit outside of the box means. We did some online job fairs. We opened up the facility to online tours, and we increased our presence on our online accounts. So that's what we did during the past year. Obviously, as things open up, we're gonna, I have plans to aggressively start recruiting for the test that'll take place early winter.
And how do you feel currently with the level of staffing that you currently have as it stands now?
The staffing levels is not where I'd like it to be. We have a lot of openings, which, especially during this pandemic, has put a little more strain on our employees. But we're within operating strength where we can function. We have a test coming up. The final date to sign up is June 30th. If anyone out there knows anyone that's interested, this would be a great opportunity for you for testing in August.
Great. We spread the word for sure. Councilmember Lupien.
Yes, hi. Thank you for all the work that you have done and do every day. I have two questions. Being on the PIC Team Advisory Committee, I'm aware that there's maybe some issues around deployment. Since the CAD implementation, the numbers that PIC goes alone, those 3 call types, has decreased. And just wondering if you can speak to that and what plans are to remedy that.
You were cutting in and out there. So the question is, the numbers have decreased since the CAD cut over?
The numbers that are PIC alone, those 3 call types that PIC gets deployed to alone, have you noticed that has decreased since the cabinet implementation, and how will you correct it?
Well, I can't determine when the calls come in. I mean, I'm sure there's depends on what's going on each and every day when those type of calls might come in. But unfortunately, the way those calls are dispatched, they're a little bit. They have to go through. The call comes in. They got to go through the emergency medical dispatch. The ProQA is what we use to determine what services that the individual calling would need, and they have to meet. Obviously, if you're on that committee, you know the 3 different requirements that they might have to meet before we can send them. So we continue to monitor that and to make sure our employees are performing as they should be when those calls come in.
Yeah, I certainly don't want you to control the calls coming in, but more that the calls maybe should be classified for PIC only and aren't. I wonder if there's
that's not accurate. They're classified for PIC only when they reach that level.
Okay. Is there some data that you could give us around the call types maybe in the last 3 months that have come in and whether or not PIC has been deployed alone?
So you're looking for the amount of times PIC was deployed alone? Yes. If you give me the dates you're looking for, I can get that to you.
And the call types that the calls came in under in the last 3 months.
I guess I don't understand the question. I'm sorry.
For the last 3 months, for the calls that qualified for a PIC team response, can you send that over, with the totals and the call types?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
No
And then
problem.
my second question is, during the time that we were setting pick up, where we were planning, the idea came up about embedding a clinician in the 911 call center, which is a model used by other cities to aid in the discernment for dispatch. And the reason given to not do that had to do with actual physical space in the 911 call center. So just wondering, is that still a factor? And, is there a possibility to make that?
Well, we operate with like I said, with an emergency medical dispatch procedures through ProQA, which lays out specifically through questions to determine the services that the individual calling may need, or the individual that another person is calling for may need. So I would have to consult with Dr. Cushman, who's helped us with this. So I'm not.
That would be great. Thank you.
Councilmember Evans, you're on mute.
Any other questions for emergency communications?
I have one or two.
Yes. Councilmember Gruber?
Thanks. Director Serrato, just just to make sure I totally understand. Well, first let me ask about the CAD project manager expense and the net decrease there. Can you explain what changed?
Yes, we're at the end of middle of this month, we won't be using them anymore.
So what's going to be the impact of that?
Well, we've only budgeted for this year through our budget. So if the executive committee decides to continue having him on board, we would have to negotiate with Monroe County to see how they could fund it. But I don't think if we can't use them, I think we're at the point in the project where we have the personnel available that will be able to lead it where it has to go.
Got it. And so when I look at the overall budget here, I'm looking at 8-4 and even 8-5. There's a vacant full-time service rep position that's being eliminated. There's a vacant part-time position that's being eliminated. And overall, your budget is actually seeing an overall decrease of around $68,000. Is that going to impact? I mean, are those vacant positions? Are they vacant because you didn't need them? Are they vacant because you couldn't fill them? Are there going to be issues with staffing levels for your department?
You're talking about the 311 position, the full-time position at 311?
Yep.
That was one of the reasons we took some data in making this determination. So the most call volume we get at 311 is between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. That's our highest call volume. So by moving the hours back from 11 p.m. to 9 p.m., between those hours, we only averaged like 27 calls between those 2 hours. So by moving those operators back, we have more people answering the phone during the higher volume time period.
Got it. So it's an efficiency measure. You don't believe there's going to be that the slight decrease in staffing here is going to have an impact on your department's ability to achieve your KPIs and things of that nature.
Yes, I'm pretty confident that we're going to be able to do that. I'm also, I'm also think that we may see a better call abandon rate because we'll have more people answering the phones when those calls come.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Councilmember Evans. Commissioner, how are you? Thank you for being here to answer our questions. I I have a question in regards to 8-3, where it says working with the county to purchase new recording system to the county. I'd like to know, in particular, what enhancements are you planning to achieve with the new system?
So presently, our backup center and our main center are on different systems. One's at the backup center is at a level below the one at the main center. So it does create some difficulties, especially when we're doing our discovery work. The information that we have to provide to the district attorney's office to provide the defendants per the latest law regarding discovery and bail reform. So the new system will provide us with the same level of protection that we have now at both facilities. Will be at the exact same level of system. And additionally, we're hoping that in the future, we'll be able to create an interface with the new CAD system to more efficiently pull the data out to supply to the district attorney's office. Because it's a pretty good drag getting all this information that's required under the new statute.
Thank you. Will the recording system also, is that something that's stored, like the data is stored on site, or is it cloud-based? Or is that a part of that enhancement? All right, could you explain to me what the recording system is like?
The county is purchasing that system. So as soon as they give me the specs on it, I could get that to you. But I don't
Okay.
have it right now.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Melendez.
Yes, thanks, Chairman Evans. Just one question related to language access. I know that 911 has a very robust system countywide. I guess the question really is, could we get some data in terms of types of calls for service, not calls for service types, but languages that are called in other than English, just to get a sense of what that volume is and whether or not there's any need for future investment in that space?
I don't know if I can, but I'll do my best to get it to you.
Appreciate that.
If we have it in our files, I'll get it to you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else on emergency communications?
I have one, Councilmember Malik.
Yes, Councilmember Peel.
All right, quick question. Do you believe your employees are paid enough to work there? Because I hear that we're losing out on a lot of people. A lot of people are quitting. So do you believe that they need a raise? Do we have it in the budget?
So before you answer that question, Director Soretto, I want to make it clear that employees for 911 are paid by the County of Monroe, although they are city employees. So the County of Monroe budgets their amount for the city for employees. We have an agreement where the city is in charge of actually, we have what we pay for, which is basically infrastructure, the building and things like that. The County of Monroe actually reimburses the city for the employees of 911, and they actually set the budget as it pertains to that. So I don't want to put the county executive in a position because this is something that the county, it's an agreement between the city and the county, even though they're city employees. So I would say that, of course, we always want to pay employees more. I think that we would want to play, especially given the pandemic. But since this is a reimbursable amount that the county sets, I wouldn't necessarily put the director in a position to have to answer that.
Thank you for that clarification.
Anything else on emergency communications? If not, I want to thank Director Soretto and his team for joining us today. I want to thank my colleagues in the administration for your time all day for these hearings. And I'll just say we'll reconvene on June 8th to hear from undistributed and contingency, IT, finance, library, RPD, and then neighborhood and business development. On June 9th, because there still were questions related to PAB, you should have held on your calendar from 9 to 3:30 adjourned hearings. And being that we adjourned the PAB hearing, we'll reconvene at 9 a.m. just for the PAB hearing. If there are other hearings that we are not able to get through and all members are not able to ask their questions on June 8th, we'll also add other departments to that June 9th date if necessary. If not, we'll just reconvene with PAB from 9 to 10 or 10:30, and then we'll be done. And then we have at 3:30, which should be on everyone's calendar, the Rochester City School District budget hearing. And then at 5:30, the joint public hearing with the Rochester City School Board. So we have that. And then on the 10th is the Finance Committee meeting. And we'll only, that will only be needed if needed. So that is our schedule for the next week. And I want to thank everyone for coming out virtually again. And we are adjourned until next Tuesday. So happy budget meeting.